Nigredo begins when matter can no longer keep the form it had. That is why destruction had to come first. Alchemy cannot purify a structure that still holds every part in the same old relation. Before the white stage can clarify, the black stage must loosen, darken, and break the first cohesion. Nigredo is not destruction for its own sake. It is the operation that makes transformation possible. The word Nigredo means blackening, but the color is only the visible sign. The deeper process is a collapse of organization. The darkening marks a moment when the previous composition is being undone through operations described as putrefactio, mortificatio, dissolutio, or corruptio. These terms do not mean exactly the same thing in every alchemical work, but they gather around one central event. The compound is losing the structure that made it what it was. That distinction matters. Nigredo is not simply the black stage, in the way black might be one color in a sequence. The blackness indicates that the old form is no longer stable. Something has begun to decay, separate, soften, dissolve, or return toward a more undifferentiated condition. The color is evidence. The operation is the real subject. Picture a closed alchemical vessel. Inside it is a mixed substance that still holds together as one body. Heat acts, time acts. Moisture, dryness, volatility, and fixation begin to pull the compound in different directions. The vessel does not create the whole transformation by itself, but it gives the breakdown a boundary. It contains the work long enough for destruction to become useful. This is the first mechanism of Nigredo, controlled loss of cohesion. A compound remains itself because its parts are bound in a certain relation. The subtle and the gross, the volatile and the fixed, the pure and the impure may all be joined so closely that they cannot yet be worked separately. As long as that relation remains intact, the matter can be heated, washed, or moved, but it still returns to the same condition. Its old form keeps reproducing itself. Nigredo interrupts that stability. The heat acts upon the matter. The matter receives the operation. The vessel holds the encounter. Time allows the relation to weaken. And the first effect is not perfection. The first effect is disorganization. This is why the black stage can look like failure. The material appears darker, less ordered, less complete, and less valuable than before. But alchemically, that apparent loss may be the first real proof that the work has entered the substance. Now look more closely at the word destruction. In Nigredo, destruction does not necessarily mean annihilation. The matter is not destroyed into absolute nothing. What is destroyed is a form, a bond, a composition, a way of holding together. The elements remain, but their previous arrangement begins to die. Nigredo is therefore better understood as deformation. The old body loses the form that prevented its parts from becoming available for another operation. What was enclosed can now be released. What was confused can become distinguishable. What was fixed in the wrong relation can begin to move. This is where separation enters. Alchemy cannot separate what remains perfectly fused. It cannot wash what cannot be exposed. It cannot purify one principle while that principle is still imprisoned inside an undivided mass. Nigredo prepares separatio because breakdown creates access. The darkened matter becomes a field in which differences can emerge. One part rises, another remains. One becomes volatile, another proves fixed. One can be distilled, another washed, another reduced, another preserved. The exact procedures and names vary across texts, and there is no single universal recipe for Nigredo. But the structural logic remains recognizable. The original compound must stop behaving as one closed identity before its principles can be treated differently. That is why prima materia often appears near this problem. Prima materia does not simply mean a convenient raw ingredient. It can name the difficult idea of matter before stable definition, or matter reduced toward a condition from which new form may be generated. Nigredo does not always produce one universally agreed substance, called the prima materia, but it moves in that direction conceptually, away from finished form and back toward possibility. The matter becomes less complete, but more transformable. There is a useful parallel in early Hermetic cosmology. Creation first appears as darkness, humid confusion, and elements so closely mixed that earth and water cannot yet be distinguished. Then fire, light, breath, and ordering intelligence introduce movement and division. That is not a direct historical definition of Nigredo. It is not a laboratory instruction, but the parallel clarifies the mechanism. Confusion comes before distinction. A mixed condition is disturbed before an ordered world can appear. The first visible order is born not by preserving the original confusion, but by breaking its undivided state. A later Hermetic language describes transmutation as passage from state to state, degree to degree, and condition to condition. Nigredo gives that general principle a severe material form. A substance does not move into a new condition merely because a new name is placed upon it. Its old condition must become unstable enough to release what it was holding. And this leads to the second paradox. Nigredo is called death because the first form cannot survive the operation. But this death prepares regeneration because it returns the material to a state in which another form can be received. The vessel becomes important again. A receiving matter must be prepared. If the old structure remains dominant, it cannot truly receive the next operation. It may be coated, temporarily altered, or changed at the surface, but its internal relation remains the same. Nigredo clears the ground by removing the authority of the first form. This is why albedo cannot simply be painted over Nigredo. Albedo, the whitening, becomes possible after the blackened matter has been dissolved, opened, separated, washed, or clarified. White does not replace black as decoration. It appears because the conditions of the matter have changed. The matter can now receive purification because Nigredo made impurities separable. It can receive clarification because Nigredo broke the confusion that hid one part inside another. It can receive a new order because the first order no longer controls the whole compound. The passage is not always immediate. Some alchemical images place changing colors between the black and the white, sometimes described through the cauda pavonis, the peacock's tail. Different authors organize the work in different ways. Some emphasize three principal colors. Others present black, white, yellow, and red. Operations can overlap, repeat, or receive different names. So the familiar sequence of Nigredo, albedo, citrinitas, and rubedo is useful as a map. It should not be mistaken for one rigid schedule followed identically by every alchemist. The symbols require the same caution. The raven's head, the black sun, the tomb, the dead body, and the sealed egg can all point toward the black work. But none of them replaces the mechanism. A raven is not Nigredo simply because it is black. A tomb is not Nigredo simply because it suggests death. The symbol becomes precise only when it carries the operation: loss of form, putrefaction, dissolution, separation, and the preparation of another birth. This is also where modern interpretations often become too loose. Nigredo is frequently reduced to depression, trauma, sadness, or a dark night of the soul. Those experiences may be used as later inner correspondences, but they are not the technical definition of blackening. An inner reading remains faithful only if it preserves the alchemical structure. A previous condition loses cohesion. Its elements become distinguishable. What had been fused can be separated. A new organization cannot be forced before the old one has actually broken down. That is more precise than saying Nigredo means feeling dark. And it keeps the boundary clear. The traditional operation comes first. The inner analogy comes second. So why did destruction have to come first? Because purification cannot select what is still inseparable. Because a new form cannot be received, while the old form still governs every relation inside the matter. Because regeneration is not the repair of the original composition. It begins when that composition has lost the power to reproduce itself. Nigredo is the moment when matter stops defending what it was. The blackness is not the goal. The death is not the final state. The collapse is not celebrated for its own sake. Each one marks the same threshold. The matter has become available to the work. So if one sentence has to remain, let it be this: Nigredo is not the destruction of matter. It is the destruction of the form that prevented matter from changing. If this distinction makes the great work more readable, subscribe for the next entry in the Alchemical Library.